Welcome back to the Inner Beauty Code, you guys. I am so excited to have our guest back on, Jane Kersel, relationship therapist. We are here to talk all things relationship, what you should look for in a partner, choosing yourself. So, Jane, welcome.
Hi, Rachel. Nice to be back.
Nice to be back with you. So, Jane, today we wanted to discuss how to have healthier relationships or have better relationships and how to choose yourself and get into an energy of hard not to forget instead of hard to get. And I wanted to ask you about that before we jump into
Yeah.
questions.
No, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think relationship is probably the most important thing in our lives. And I mean relationship in the biggest form, as in we relate to everything. I'm relating to you, relating to a camera. I was just relating to a cat. I've got a water bottle here. I'm in relationship to that. So I think we have to be careful not to sort of segment things into boxes. How we are in one aspect of a relationship will be how we are or would want to be in all aspects of our relationship. So I think fundamentally, before we start to talk about relationships with other people, we've got to start to really look at our relationship with ourselves. That's the starting point. And if you've grown up in a family where maybe you weren't allowed to foster all those beautiful just qualities of your own self, you've learned to hide some of your most beautiful features away, as in, say you grew up in a family where everything's very maths inspired, scientific, it's all about making money and it's all about accolades and success, then perhaps your creativity, your softness, your the part of you that is a dreamer gets completely locked down, shut away, and generally isn't appreciated. And so you then learn to shapeshift to become more like the people around you. And we call that in psychology conditioning. And as you get older, you start to suddenly realize, actually, this that I've conditioned myself into isn't necessarily who I really am now, as I stand in my 20s with my own agency, with my own money, friends I've cultivated rather than friends I've been had chosen for me by my parents, say. And I think that's where we start to really perhaps even attract those parts of us that we're disowning in ourselves. And that's part of shadow work. So, we might then fall into a relationship with an artist or someone who's in music, something that personifies for us that hidden part of ourselves that we don't have access to. And so actually, if we start with the relationship to ourselves, we want to already embrace and find that artist inside of ourselves, that creative part. And then we wouldn't necessarily be attracted to that thing that they carry. So we'd bring in a whole different energetic.
I wanted to ask you more about shadow work, actually, now that you bring that up. And how do we shift from disowning parts of ourselves and seeking that in other people? Because I think that might be where dependency or codependency can come in as well, when you are clinging to something in someone else so much because it brings you value. How do you shift that? And what things can people do in order to find out what their shadows are?
Yeah, I think first of all we have to be careful of that term shadow, as in it sounds like it's dark and dangerous and deadly. And will it mean all my repressed jealousy suddenly unleashed into the world? And I mean, Jung was looking at it. He was a guy who first sort of termed it shadow. And I think other psychologists have run with it. And often today in social media, you'll see it much more as a sort of shadow work, as if it's something you can just open a lid and out it pops and it's a done deal. And, oh, I've dealt with my shadow work. That's a tick in that box. And really, it's much more nuanced and very sort of, it's a lovely practice to do all your life. So I look at it more like you've gone to the gym all your life, education, conditioning, and you've been taught to use your biceps. And then shadow work is, well, actually, your biceps are working really well, but did you know you had triceps on the back of your arms? And so it's about then what is in those triceps? What is that muscle? And as I said, if you lived in a scientific kind of community, your tricep will be creativity. If you've grown up in a place of you having to be the pleaser or the negotiator or the mediator in your familial relationships, then the part of you that is a little bit more self-centered, choosing itself first, will be in shadow. So, to unlock that, a really good way to do this is to look at your friendships around you, or just people around you that you are close to, and identify what it is in them that you judge, positively or negatively. So, you might be in a relationship with someone who's very self centered. Say you were that person who in childhood was a server, pleaser, diplomat. You'll probably draw in an energetic of someone much more narcissistically inclined on the spectrum. So we're on a polarity here. Here's you, massive pleaser. Here's the partner, massive self-centered. Possibly a bit of Aryan fire as well, as in you can come with me, but you'll hang on to my coattails. And your journey and their journey in that relationship is to basically come a little bit more to the center ground for both of you. So for the person who's disenfranchised, to move a little bit more towards being, ooh, this is me when I'm flexing my self-centered muscle, my it's all about me muscle. And for that more narcissistic, self-centered person to come a little bit more towards empathy, understanding others' needs. So it's a beautiful kind of ebb and flow dance, if you want to see it like that, rather than a rigid fixed state. We have so many shadows. I mean, I prefer the word polarities. The polarity of what you show out in the world, in the light, everyone can see it, is conscious of it, versus all those parts of you you don't know about, are deep in your unconscious, you perhaps don't want to let out, for fear of they came out when I was 3, I got shut down by my parents, the hell they're coming out again. And so the work is really starting to evolve as a mature individual and reclaim these parts of ourselves that literally got locked up along the way and they're just there in the wings. It's more like they're just in the wings. You don't call on them immediately. You use your primary muscles because those are the ones you're conditioned. It's like we're all in a trance. Those are the ones you know to use. And then meditation psychology is about becoming aware. I'm aware when I'm talking to you. I'm in this place of a more authority sort of speaking. We're not talking as if we're just girlfriends. That's what meditation gives you, the awareness. And then from that awareness, you learn the psychology and the patterns and the processes. And that's when you start to evolve. So shadow work is a constant evolution. I've been doing it for nearly 30 years, and I'll be doing it for the last breath of my life, I'm sure, as will you.
Yes, definitely. I was just going to say and ask, I think in my experience, things will continue to pop up. And I just because I'm trying to think if someone doesn't know what you're talking about and they're trying to figure out where they can work on parts of themselves or reclaim
Mm,
disowned parts of themselves. But when someone isn't aware of their shadows, or they can't figure out, maybe they know something's wrong, but they can't identify it yet. Yes, there's the self-awareness part. By just paying attention to things, things will continue to show up in your life and look like patterns or be like a reaction that you have, right, to a situation. And maybe that's where you can learn to like recognize the pattern or something that might be popping up to be healed, like you said, when you're jealous of somebody, or when you have a harsh reaction, or something feels
yeah,
painful. Is that where it would be something to pay attention to?
you might find it in something that's painful for you. You might find it in something as simple as you have a partner and their values, beliefs for what a good relationship is about is entirely different to your own. So in that dynamic, it's really useful to ask each other, what's your love language? Because otherwise you might be doing something for your partner that you need as your love language, but it completely misses the mark for them. And so that's about working with someone else's difference. But with regard to what you're actually asking me, it could be you see your best friend and she's always late coming for a dinner. And it really knocks you. It really pisses you off. And you've asked her, you've told her, you said, look, can't believe it. And she repeatedly keeps on doing it. That will have an element of something for you, a nugget of gold that's lying underneath that. And you have choice. Either you can keep banging onto her about you're late, or you can do some self inquiry and go, what is it about her behavior that is really bugging me? And you might find by unpacking it, it's far more about disrespect Maybe that's what you learned. That's what you mean by if you're late, it means you're disrespecting me. You don't value me. You put me last. So it's saying a lot of things about you that other people wouldn't care. You know, they'd read a book, person arrives, and those are those little tells that speak volumes. And then in that moment, you can have that conversation from a much deeper place so that she really hears you. So, you know, when you repetitively arrive late, I make it mean. I make it mean not what she makes it mean. I make it
Mhm.
mean that you don't value me, you don't respect me, you don't see me as important. And then she can go, wow, I never, God, I didn't make it mean that. I never realized. And that's when you get the healing, because then she's committed to changing her behavior because she's heard you from a deeper place rather than you just admonishing her for not turning up on time, which frankly for most people when they're admonished they usually end up becoming quite childish. It's like, shit, my mum's told me off again, or God, my dad's on my back. You know, we literally drop to being sort of almost parental in our accusatory tones. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and, I think that's super helpful. I can think of so many scenarios when that
Me too.
happens in every relationship, not just late, but it's
Yeah.
so that was such a good example of how to recognize the patterns within yourself that you can just basically questioning your own behavior because I guess at the end of the day, it is about us and not about them so much because it's our reaction, so, ah,
It's
that's helpful.
questioning our behavior, which is really important, absolutely right. And it's also doing that thing of you can't change anyone else. You can't expect them to change. You can't bang on about them till they change. That won't work. They'll become like Pavlov's dog. They're doing it because they've been told so many times, you know, whipped into shape. They finally do it. So that you have to then look at yourself and go, the only person I can change in this dynamic is me. My relationship to that, my reaction to that. What is it about it bugs me? And sometimes it can bug you to such a degree, and you've uncovered your process in that, and you go, well, actually, this is not for me. And that's being a big grown up, where you actually go, look, this dynamic, I have told you my vulnerability, I have shared you my feelings, you still are doing it. Actually, I just want to be around people who really listen to me. And so sadly, I'm going to have to let this go. That is high self-esteem, high self-worth, and kind. You're doing it with kindness. You're not beating them up for being late. You're just saying, "This is not for me."
That makes so much sense, and which leads me to my next question to you. So, I guess being comfortable communicating your needs and what you want in a relationship, again, maybe not expecting the other person to change or doing it in a way that's blaming
Mm.
them and saying that you need to adhere to what I believe is right. I know I've noticed within myself and with other in the past and with other women, maybe even men too, how it's difficult to sometimes express your needs in a way that's not needy, demanding, or emotional, but from a place, like you just said, a healthy place. So maybe I guess that would be considered part of choosing yourself, right? Being able to express what you need in a relationship, but
Mm.
being okay with however the other person reacts and being comfortable enough with accepting your needs and respecting them that you're okay to walk away despite what the other person how the other person reacts. So maybe before we get into some questions, can we talk about how to choose yourself and maybe from a place of respecting your own boundaries and
Mm.
just being comfortable communicating needs and what would make you happy in a relationship with others?
Yeah, I think that's all really, really good and really valid. And I think it's really hard to catch ourselves, particularly as women. So as children, we're usually brought up to serve. You know, that is part. You know, in my family, I was the one who set the table. I'd be the one be expected to help my mother wash up. Meanwhile, my brother and my father would be doing whatever they're doing, and it became just an unconscious bias towards the women do the sort of more servile stuff in the house, and the men get to do whatever the men do, and it was never questioned. And I think many of us are still living in that dynamic, even though it may not be said, spoken, but we're still living in that energetic. And I think so from the get go, that puts us in that sort of trance. We're sort of hypnotized almost in a way. We're in a record groove and we can't get out of that groove and kind of put the needle down in a new groove yet. And when we first start to do it, it sounds really clunky and really clumsy because we've had to leverage so much energy to get out of service and pleasing in order to like make a stand, that we usually come out quite aggressive, and then our partners go, what the hell, like what, like why are you so, what, I mean, I just did that, like what's the problem with you? And that's just us trying to build that muscle as quickly as we can, but failing because we've had to almost man up, get the man's trousers on and really like be quite, dogmatic and, shouty, just to get what we need. Because underneath that, we truly don't believe we can have it. That's the trouble. The trouble's not with them. The trouble's with our underlying belief is we've not been shown, we've not had it looking at us, that actually we have the agency to go, actually, I'd love it if we could do it this way. Whereas boys generally are brought up to be, go out there, see the world, get a good woman who'll look after you. I mean, they're set up for life with strong self-belief, self-worth. Most boys, if they've had that kind of parenting that we've seen over the last 20 odd years. And I think that's one of the hardest things. So women need to start to A, get aware of that, and then B, start to practice. And if they're clunky, go, look, I might sound a bit clunky as I do this. It's a new muscle I'm stretching. But start to say what they need. But not in a very masculine, so you know, buddy, I've written a checklist of 5 things I need in order for me to stick around. Like, he's just going to go, okay, frankly, I don't need another guy in this relationship. So there's a way to do it where you don't have to come out of yourself. That's the trick. So you got to look at, when you say things, have you shapeshifted? Have you had to get on your moral high horse? Have you had to get shouty? Have you got to, you know, feel like you're banging someone over the head? Or can you just go, hey, so, I'm loving being in this, but these are the things that, really get my goat. So they hear you.
Like staying, like you've said before, in a soft place in your feminine energy rather than like mentalizing and being
Definitely.
aggressive and assertive from your wounded or distorted masculine energy.
Yeah. Because that hurts us double then, doesn't it? Not only are we with someone who's not sort of appreciating what we need, but also then we're having to sort of come out of ourselves and be untrue to ourselves, shapeshift, in order to try and get more leverage to get them to understand. Whereas, why can't you be in a relationship where it's conscious between the pair of you? You're both
Mhm.
mutually wanting it to work, mutually wanting it to grow, mutually caring for each other's own process in their evolution of their own consciousness, their goals, their beliefs, their values. And so you're able to negotiate in a soft way, in a loving way.
I love that. And one more thing. So
Mm,
we did mention about being nervous or afraid about a guy's reaction, and something you said made me think
mm,
about this. Is it possible for, say, you're in a heterosexual relationship, man, woman, whatever, for your
mhm,
partner who may be having more avoidant tendencies? Do you believe
mm,
if you change maybe the way that you communicate with them, or maybe, you know what I mean? Like, what I'm
mhm.
saying is, I know a lot of men who are afraid of losing their freedom or don't wanna be in something serious, and I don't really know what that even means, to be honest, and from now on, I'm gonna start asking guys who say this, or friends of mine that are males. But how do you navigate through that when you're with someone who might have a tendency to be avoidant or might be afraid or just might think, I mean, I don't know what the motivation is behind it, whether, I interviewed someone on my podcast who said that guys just are always looking for the next best thing, or they're afraid they might miss out on something. So how do you find or be able to be in a healthy relationship with someone? Do you think that if you communicate that way while expressing your needs, but still giving them the option without getting emotional and angry on them, that
Mhm.
they might come closer to you, or they might change how they view or a relationship? Or do you think
Yeah,
that that's just they're gonna have to do their own work, and if they're not ready or whatever?
I think it's a bit of both. So when a guy says, I don't want it to be something serious, actually, whenever anyone says anything, they're saying far more about themselves and their own process than they are about what you're about and your own process. So a guy might have said that with reference to previous relationships he's been in, maybe his girlfriend has been very clingy or has been quite sort of like stalkery, on social media. So we don't know. Equally, he could have had a family dynamic between his parents where he felt, he watched maybe one of the parents being, sort of abused in inverted commas, as in it was aggressive. And so for him, the idea of in a relationship, maybe for him doesn't sound like it's a reality that he can see. So I think that the key is to really ask. I've noticed that you mentioned this thing about not wanting to be in something serious. What's behind that? Sounds an interesting concept. Like, do it from a non-judgmental place rather than a more sort of place of needing to know in order to nail him to a fixed point. In a relationship, anyone who says I don't want to be in something serious means equally they might fall very quickly, and they haven't owned that in themselves, and it could be nothing about you. So it's sort of like, okay, here I am, here, there you are. And in between us is this phrase that is, I don't want to be in something serious. Let's have a walk around it and unpack that. Let's see what it's about. What leads you to say that? What's your experience that has led you to that? Because for me, my experience is I don't even think about it. I'm just in the relationship. I mean, why would I even want to sort of like tie you down to a fixed point unless it's some weird sexual thing you want to do? I'm joking.
No, that's another conversation I wanna have with you on we don't have time for all that today, but, I actually it makes me think about, someone that, not to make this about me, but a guy that I had dated,
Mm,
and the reason why I ask is I see this comment, it's common, and an old version of myself would have been like, "Oh, he doesn't want anything serious, so bye, like, screw you, you're not for me," kind of
mm,
thing, and I think I'm learning how to change my dynamic and my interactions with men, as far as doing all the similar things that you just spoke about. But there has been a guy in my past that told me he didn't want anything serious, but then come to find out he's had multiple girlfriends for extended periods of time. So that's where I asked, because it was like very confusing and contradicting. So maybe one of the things you mentioned, like maybe he falls easily or whatever could have been the case, but just made me think about that and was interesting, which
yeah, but equally in that, Rachel, that's a really good example because as women, because we're used to sort of like being, look at me, love me, honor me, take
mhm,
me. We will naturally default to making it be about us, whereas, they're probably saying something just really about themselves. We are primed to make it about ourselves, but we don't have to. If we're conscious, we can go, well, I mean, this is not about me. I mean, I've got enough self-worth to know, you know, even asking the question or even starting to pose these things, it's like, well, we're just in this thing. I mean, why are we defining it? Why are we labeling it? Why are we trying to put a future date on it? I mean, I know who I am today. I have no idea who I'll be tomorrow. What part of me will show up tomorrow? Y- I don't think we can fix anyone to a fixed spot. And I think, in a way, we women need to get comfortable with also not needing to control, and to start to own actually we are as fluid as any man out there if we're really in our true essence. I remember having to say those vows of you're standing in the church and it's like till sickness and until death, and you kind of go, well, I mean, honestly, like, honestly, I don't know if I can say that. I mean, I can say it today, but I don't know who I'm going to be in 10 years time. I don't know who you're going to be in 10 years time. I don't even know if we're going to be on the planet in 10 years time. But it's a very male construct. I don't mean gender, I mean masculine energy, that sort of patriarchal, rule boundaried, Saturnian, disciplinarian, everything in its fixed place. Let's control it. Let's put a lid on it. Let's put a ring on it.
mhm.
Rather than life isn't that. It's this ebb and flow. It's this flux, and isn't it?
Yes, definitely. I'm definitely started to change my view, and I just was reading this book actually on tantra, and just this woman's experience about even the sexual dynamic between people. We get so fixed on like
Mm.
jealous, like trying to control someone and keep someone in your life. And I believe in monogamy 1000%, and not being promiscuous to an extent. But yeah, it just that all that's really fascinating. And
If you've got to have a conversation around monogamy, like already it's setting things up, isn't it? Almost to fail. Do you know
mhm,
what I mean? It's like if you're really wanting to be in a relationship with someone, why are we even having to have this discussion about, do I trust you? You've checked out women on Instagram. That means you don't love me. That means you don't want to be in this relationship. It's sort of like, hey, buddy, listen, if you want to be in this relationship, great, because I'm in it 100%, but you got to show up. And that means not looking at loads of women on Instagram. I mean, I'll do that too. I can equally go look at tons of men and go like them. I mean, if that's the dynamic you want to set up between us here, it's not my bag, but that's the way this is heading. I think we've got to be a little bit more, choose ourselves and go, I mean, that just feels a bit, I don't know, not straight. It just doesn't feel like you're committed to want to be in a relationship, that you're interested in going someplace deep and gorgeous.
I think all of the things you mentioned are going to be really helpful for people listening on changing their
Hope
perspective
so.
of themselves and how they interact in relationship. Which I want to move to some of the questions and the topics that we had, which are about being in a relationship and what we should look for in partnership. So, some questions that we have were: is there such a thing as the one, and what does that mean to be the one?
Yeah, the one. If only life was that simple, wouldn't it? You're like, the one, and now I'm sorted, and now I can relax the frenzied brain that continually is searching for something better, brighter, shinier, sexier, whatever. The one is as good as today, isn't it? She's the one today. She may not be, he may not be in a week's time. But it's not about that's setting up an energetic of, okay, I'm choosing this because today it feels like you're the one. The one comes over time, or even there aren't just one. It's for me, relationships are all about you learn something about yourself, and you can't learn this depth about yourself unless you're in a relationship relating to something. Otherwise, you can just meditate and conject, but you've got to be in it to really dive deep and work through stuff together. Both of you have got to do that. And so for me, a relationship, instead of defining it in this way of some sort of shape, let's define it in a whole new way of it's a conscious, evolving, beautiful, full of passion, full of love, full of respect, full of honoring, full of collaboration, communication, that is taking both of you karmically to a whole new level. I think that's where we should be setting our eyes on relationships. And
Putting it
actually I think they're but also I think they're valid. I think we can get there. I think we women have got to stop expecting the men to get there first. I think we women have got to show up and go, that's what I want. And I'm not going, that's what I want. I'm going, that's what I want. It's not rocket science, guys. And then we break down their defenses and all their fears and all their vulnerabilities, dick's too small, dick's too big, whatever. We break that all down and they show up. They show up as normal human beings, equally just desiring love, friendship, intimacy. I mean, the basic human needs of us little animals.
Yes, and I couldn't agree more with you on all of that. And subtopic here on that question is, if you are still searching, you have someone that's great, that's right in front of you, but you're still searching for the one, thinking there might be someone better out there, is that being immature and unrealistic, or is that how do you decipher between being immature and unrealistic and never being satisfied, or is it your intuition telling you something?
Yeah, I think we have to be careful nowadays because obviously there's so much more choice available, isn't there? I mean, I grew up when there
Mhm.
were no mobile phones, so the choice was whoever the locals guys were down the road or at school. Whereas now suddenly, it's like they could be all over the world. There's these dating apps. I mean, and dating apps are just, like pick a mix. I want this today, I want that tomorrow, and it's very visually inspired. And honestly, I think women who've never grown up feeling pretty have a much better gig of getting a nice, healthy relationship that women who've been told are very pretty and they're beautiful by their families, or by their sort of familial society as they grew up, because that is defining them by what they look like. And so, guess what? They now think unconsciously to be in a relationship with someone, it's all about how I look and all about my physique and how I show up like that. No one is interested in my mind, my intellect, my values, my desires or hobbies, whatever. It's all about looks. And so you will end up in a relationship where you equally are checking out people by their looks. So
Mm.
it's sort of saying, if we're both in this looking good, we're feeling good. It's about
Mhm.
building self-esteem again. But however, if that relationship, when you get to your 40s, it possibly will crash and burn, because guess what? Your looks will be much harder to hold on to. And at that point, it's suddenly like, why are we together? Like, the looks aren't there, the weight's piled on, we slob in front of the TV. And so we have to get a really good relationship bubbling along that has longevity, you've got to go way beyond looks. And so
Mhm.
this day of manifestation, these list building, this shopping list of my man, my woman has to be blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
It's like no one fits all of the bill. And if you're just going on looks, you're going to not notice whatever the beautiful things are that person also brings. And it's
Mhm.
really vacuous. I mean, it's so damn vacuous. There's no spirituality in that. There's no juice in that.
Yeah, so it's basically you're not seeing what's in front of you either because you're too busy trying to find someone that's checking all the boxes instead of maybe finding something you didn't know you wanted or liked because you don't give anyone a chance that you're not present in the relationship.
Yeah. Checking the boxes is a mentalized process, and there's nothing embodied in that. And it means you are by rote going through your list, but you're not feeling the energetic connection between the two of you. Look at that classic of a squat, dumpy, bald-headed guy with the most gorgeous Amazonian woman beside him. Why does
Mhm.
that work? Because he fuels her confidence, right? And
Mhm.
she in turn throws so much light on him that he gets his needs met as well. So ultimately, what you're dealing with in that is your own lack of confidence, that you need a good, hot looking guy or a good, sexy looking woman alongside you to make you feel good about yourself.
Mhm.
And that will never work, because you're building all of your self worth on the looks of that person and how you look to other people by standing alongside them. And then, well, guess what? They might leave. And then what do you do?
Yeah. Um what about the concept of if he wanted to, he would be and then being attracted to what you can't have, kind of in the same breath.
Yeah. I mean, that's being attracted to what you don't what you know is sort of bad for you has a lot to do with our own sort of, like, maybe our rules about ourselves. So maybe that guy is a bit of a naughty boy, and that titillates, and you like the lack of control of that, and that could say a lot about how your own life is very controlled and fixed, and so you need him in a way almost to shake that out of you, get out of that dynamic and start to be a little bit naughty yourself. That's the shadow.
Mhm.
He's come into your life to show you being naughty is okay. So you try being naughty and see where you get, to learn about yourself. Equally, it could be we've seen it in our dynamic in our family relationship where maybe our father transgressed or our mother transgressed. And so for us, it feels like a bit of a normative pattern of behavior. And there we have to be careful. It's that, because that won't feed our self-esteem. That won't help our self-worth by any means.
No.
And then there was another bit to that question, wasn't there,
Yeah,
about
so, the second part was coming from the place of if a guy wants to be with you, he's going to pursue you, and if he's not pursuing you, does that mean he's not into you and that you should move on, or does that mean that you should come forward? Because, you get this thing where there's a push kinda pull where you're chasing somebody
yeah,
that doesn't
yeah.
wanna be with you. How do you navigate through that?
So first of all, I would give it some time, as in check in with what that dance is. If they're not sort of coming forward, it could be they're petrified of you. I know some guys. I remember leaving school and going back to some school activity, some, like, 10 years later, and all these guys were coming up to me going, "Oh, I was so scared of you, like, oh my god, like," and I was like, I had no idea. I just thought, like, you didn't fancy me. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Sorry, my cat is knocking the camera. Um, but you make it mean these ridiculous things like, oh my god, clearly I'm not attractive enough, and they're thinking, oh my god, she's like, hands off. So I think you've got to, again, dive under the bonnet and see what's going on. Ask them and give it some time. I've noticed you don't seem to call back or whatever. Are you? Are you sort of shy? Am I too much for you? In a jokey way? I mean, be too much for him. It's not it's not your problem if he's shy, but you can work on it together. Or you could be with a guy who's just completely likes the chase but doesn't want anything else. And I think your intuition, certainly probably your friends, will tell you that sooner than you realize. And so follow that. Don't chase something ultimately for so long that it just hasn't got legs. Like, why would you do that? It's not worth it. It's not worth your time.
No.
And also, maybe it's not the time for the relationship. I just wanted to say that because, maybe you meet them at like, 22 and they're still quite, immature and just after like, oh, I would need more sex to understand how all these buttons work and, what I do.
Mhm.
Go do that and then come back maybe when you're a bit older. And if you want to be in a relationship, let's see how it goes, this energetic between us.
Great advice. Another thing is, why do I fall in love fast and then fall out of love just as fast? Is love built over time, or should it come soon in the relationship? And this also has to do with like, what's a healthy pace that you should gauge for a relationship?
So again, all of those questions are head thinking and not enough embodied feeling. How do you feel about this relationship? What's your heart tell you? What's your breathing like when you're with them? Are you relaxed? Do your hands not clench, aren't sweaty? How are they around you? How does it feel to be around them rather than this sort of timescale? So let things evolve rather than you trying to mentalize, okay, this has got to be in this shape by this date. And tune in, tune into your centers more about that. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree and makes sense to me. And then, so the part where things are really hot and heavy, really fast, and
I
yeah,
understand that. Sorry, I missed that bit of the question. I mean,
yeah.
first of all, that can be glorious, can't it? It can be so excited, you're just all your endorphins are really firing on all cylinders. Their endorphins are firing on all cylinders. And of course, if it's based on that, it will eventually sort of fizzle out. So I think it's being conscious of, it could be a sexual tension between the two of you, but then there's nothing left after that. And again, I think it's about really being mindful of that. Notice, oh my God, I've really stepped into this in a big way. I'm really enjoying this. I'm really like trying to cling to it. And ask yourself why. It always comes back to you. And equally it can be a bit addictive. If you have a slightly addictive personality and you're into the next chase, that also is something to look at in yourself. Am I just about the superficial layer? Am I just about them seeing a bit of me and I don't want them to see my shadow, my darker parts, my jealous parts, parts of me that doesn't have wet makeup when I wake up in the morning, all of that? And is that why you then jump ship just as it's about to kind of go somewhere deep? That's another thing to check on yourself.
I totally can relate and understand all of that. Makes
Yeah.
sense. And then the idea of falling in love with potential and maybe being open to dating someone who's not your ideal type or doesn't fit the mold of what you're trying to find on your list. I mean, I hate the list idea, but this ideal person, if maybe being open to dating someone else, and then why do we stick around with people who aren't really what we want, but then we see potential in them?
Yeah. I think, first of all, when you're young, when you're in your 20s, I would try out different types because I don't think we necessarily know our type. We might
Mhm.
think our type, but we don't know our type. So explore because everybody brings something different to a relationship and will teach you something. And the potential, again, is something we are sort of projecting outwards onto other people. And that's the hard bit because often we'll meet someone and we'll project so much more onto them than they actually carry. And then later down the line, we go, oh, actually, you're not what I thought you were or what I felt you to be. And that's your own, again, issue when perhaps you're someone who fantasizes, maybe you've got a lot of
Mm.
Neptune or Pisces in your chart, which is all about the dream of romance and, oh, I just want to swim in that. But I mean, that's beautiful and lovely. And you want that before you have 4 kids, because guess what? it's hard freaking work with 4 kids, and it's those memories of that beautiful, halcyon days of the nirvana of that will take you through those incredibly tough days of 4 kids under the age of 8. And then you can go back to it, but you have to have the memory of that to take you there.
Yeah, and so basically to sum up all these things about choosing the right person and how do you show up better in dating from all the things that you said, it's like being patient, stop overthinking and just allow things to unfold and trust what you're seeing in that person and be open and comfortable expressing what you need and maybe what how you would like to see the things go without coming at it from a place of assertiveness and aggression could be a good
Yeah,
start.
a good start, and also just the exploring. Like when you want to visit a country, you don't go going, okay, we're going to do this. I mean, you might do this, and this when you get there, but then something will catch your eye, and you'll suddenly go, oh, let's walk down that street that you hadn't seen before on your guide list, or let's go do that. And so that's the same with a relationship. I mean, you're exploring, aren't you? You're exploring another's world, friendship group, personality, body, feelings. I mean, it's so multifaceted and multi-layered. You just want to go, okay, I'm ready to explore whatever this brings. And you've got to just check in every now and again. Is this good for me? Is this feeling good? Is it healthy for me? Am I feeling happy in this? Have my friends told me I am shape shifting when I'm around them? That's another good tell. If they suddenly see you're someone completely different when you're around them. It's all of that tells you whether you're potentially in a good place for yourself or not.
Amazing. And so I think a really good thing that I realize and just even what I've learned from you from our conversations is being present for the experience of a relationship and just allowing yourself to get to know somebody and see who they are and like you just said, see into their world and being comfortable with the unknown instead of having this blueprint of what it should look like. And if they don't fit that, then you starting to reject the relationship or start to get where women can get crazy and emotional and unhealthy in their interactions with men. I don't know. I think changing the perspective sounds like a really healthy way to approach dating? Because I know one of the questions from one of the girls here, she was wondering how to be in a relationship while she's still healing, or is she ready for a relationship? And I think it's from what I've seen from her, it's like changing your perception and all the things that you've mentioned are really helpful ways to do that instead of being anxious and allowing your insecurities to overrule your own personality and show who you are. And all the great things about you. I think you can self sabotage in a way with relationships when you are the way that you frame it is unhealthy.
I think a lot of women, young women, can can see a relationship as a sort of a way of them having to shapeshift around this guy that they like.
Hmm.
And I think that is where relationships nosedive and end, because I think on an energetic level the guy feels that. Even though he may not be able to consciously say it, I think just energetically it's already the fractures are there. And I think it's all about just that exploration, check in, that just and that is giving you high self-worth, high self-confidence, choosing yourself. Not in a choosing yourself is not a way of saying it's all about me. It's just choosing yourself as in I'm bringing all of me. I'm not just going to bring selected parts that he will like and approve of, because that is, again, if you're doing that 20 years down the line, there are going to be other parts of you coming out, and that will create, and the same for him, will create some sort of dissonance between the pair of you. It's about honesty, integrity, isn't it? Really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel good when you're in a relationship with someone and you don't feel like you can express yourself in an authentic way because you're nervous that you might be rejected. And I know I've been there in the past,
Mm.
and I'm definitely much better than I have been about that. And I feel just all the things that you said are just really helpful for women. So hopefully everyone
But
um,
Also for men too, like I think we have to remember that as much as we get all this bravado from some guys, like the Andrew
Mhm.
Tates of this world, I mean, I would I would be really interested to know if he's actually ever been in a functional relationship, like a healthy relationship. Because the way that guy talks, it's as if he's been severely damaged either in his family upbringing or in his relationships with women. Because the way he talks about them, the way he denigrates them, the exploits they get up to, that is not a conscious, healthy human being at play.
Totally makes sense, and I think, I guess, a way to start recognizing that when you start choosing yourself, it's easier when you'll get more comfortable and secure with yourself, but then it's easier when you're interacting with someone else to start noticing, yeah, just what you said, like, "Huh, something doesn't seem right or healthy with their
Mm,
point of view," so it's easier for you to
mm,
I think that might have helped me to when I was started healing myself to see that, okay, I can see that this pattern is something that I used to struggle with, and they're not working on it, so I don't think that's might be a discerning way to
mm.
choose whether someone's right for you, possibly.
Exactly, and this is, from me with learnt not only professional experience, but my own learnt experience. It's not like I was this wise or had these tools as a 20-year-old. So why I love doing this podcast is I'm hoping that something that's imparted between the two of us starts to get watered down towards those 20-year-olds, and they get an easier path, men and women, everyone. This is not about man hating, it's just trying to bring light onto the fractures that society has created and the imbalances. Everyone is
Yeah.
ultimately scared, fearful, vulnerable.
And I think, understanding that it helps to not get angry with people too, because I think even
Mm,
I'm going 38, and even men my age, I've heard saying that they are immature and they just want to, hang out with their boys, and they're don't want anything serious or want to settle down. And I think that's just people being afraid to look at themselves and heal. And I think, yeah, these conversations will be really helpful not only for younger ages, but people my age too that are still single or haven't been in a committed relationship. Who knows?
Something you just raised then was really important about the sort of Peter Pan complex, this
Mhm.
eternal young guy who just wants to explore and look out for other things that might come his way. And that is a loud shout out to he's never had a deep enough sexually, energetically tantric relationship with a woman. And again, what's interesting in our society is we women go and blame him, as
Mhm.
in, you're the one with the issue, why you won't settle down. Well, actually, we could instead embrace ourselves as more tantric. Just because they're not doesn't mean we can't be. And so, why
Mhm.
don't we show up in more tantric, energetic, where we lead the sex, where we lead the depth of that field? If you really look back at the tantric teachings, it was the female that brought the man to that gate of heaven, right? Literally, a man
Mhm.
cannot get there by himself. He needs women, which is why, exactly why, the church in England and over Europe suppressed this wild. You go back in time
Mhm.
to the Indian temples, and there's all these beautiful tantric goddesses around, in sexual acts
Mhm.
that was then completely like shut down. Like, the woman is wild. Like, I was just reading about witches, and if you were a witch and then you were basically Satan's child, and you would be burned at the stake. And we are still
Mhm.
carrying all that in our DNA. And I think we women have to come forward and go, yeah, I have the power to take a man really deep. Like, imagine if you're walking around with that. I have the power to take a man really deep in a sexual union where he will meet his God.
Mhm.
I mean, who wouldn't want a piece of that?
I it's
I mean,
interesting because you
who
and I have
else?
talked about this.
Why ever would you look
Yeah.
outside? Like, if you were doing that, if the energy was flowing between you and you had that richness, why on earth would you want to look at some woman in a gym?
It's so interesting that you bring this up because you and I have had this conversation a while ago, and I've been learning a lot about this, and it takes me back through my own sexual expression and experience. And I've always been very fascinated by sex. And I look at sex as the energetic exchange and how women can take on, or they say even scientifically, I don't know who says it, but that you take on all the partners that your partner has been with, not only energetically, and you have a chance of being exposed to whatever bacterias or STDs they might have
Charming.
got from their
Sounds
past.
horrendous. Why would
past
why would why would we ever have sex? It sounds absolutely like bleh.
Yeah, well, there's that aspect of it, but also I think people obviously have lost that sacred connection that sex is supposed to be, and if people, like you said, were experiencing that more and I think there's a lot of healing that needs to come, with women and men, but specifically women and their bodies and even their own vaginas around sex and acceptance and being okay with their sexuality and sensuality in a healthy way that's not just being used, or let me use my sexuality to get power over men or get what I want. It's I think I'm so interested in that, and have thought about it when I'm trying to figure out what I want to do, after this. I'm so interested to learn more about this because I think it could be really healing on so many levels for women if they started to reconnect to that healthy feminine energy and the power that comes with that if they use it in a healthy way.
I love it. I think we have to be careful even using the word feminine because I have clients who sort of imagine they've got to walk around in Laura Ashley dresses and cook cookies and basically never say a bad word or a crossword. As if the feminine has been denigrated to this passive, caring blob of home baked cookies and
Mhm.
hugs. No, the feminine, the men and the women have, but it's a very powerful energy, and sex, you're right, does need to be taken to this deeper spiritual place for us all to want to have sex in our lives. Otherwise, these the way sometimes sex shows up, even on our TV or on our in our culture, is so mechanical and
Mhm.
so dry, ironically, that it doesn't make anyone actually seek anything higher. It's like the expectation is it's going to be a bit this, it's going to be a bit that. Okay, do it for England. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and even the orgasm, I know so many women who are having sex without having orgasms, and I think
Mm,
that is a highlight of the disconnection between you being being in feminine power. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but also in your body, and I
let's
think
use it.
yeah. And I think in your body, and I think that right there is an indication that something isn't going right because it's supposed to be a pleasurable experience, I believe. And
Yeah, but a lot of women, I think, don't even sort of say what they want, or if the guy prematurely ejaculates, they're like, "Oh, well, that's it, it's over." Well, I mean, no, it's like, okay, now it's my turn, or teaching men how to do it, not from a again functional, spend 3 minutes on my neck and then go down to my breasts and then finally go for goal. No, like it's feel the nuances, like let's feel into the energy. Let's feel into the breathing. That's the other thing, because a lot of guys come to sex nowadays or in the past with an agenda of I am going to calm down. I am going to get my stress basically out of me and
mhm,
into you. And then I can just fall asleep and snore.
mhm,
Well, actually, no, for women, it's not an exchange of just dump your stress in me. It's about I need you to be tender, collaborative, soft, kind, in union with me before we even get naked. And if
mhm,
you're not, I can't go there. I'm having to come out of myself to service you, and I'm not going to do it. End of. Do you know what I mean?
I absolutely know what you mean, and I think there were some questions about when is it okay to have sex? When is too quick? And I think if you're approaching it,
Mm.
and this is just even what I've, come to, in my just in the past couple of years, I had a sexual experience with someone. I think I've told you about this before, where how many times are you having sex with someone, you're not even looking into their eyes? Like, I had a sexual experience with a guy where
Mm.
he was looking into my eyes as he was having an orgasm, and that just like I can't I don't think I'll ever well, until, I find another partner, but that experience was so I remembered it, like, so well because
Yeah.
I was so connected with him at that time, and, I mean, I never asked him if he felt anything from that too, but just if you're wondering when the right time is to have sex, I am taking this into my own life and my own choices with partners that I have in the future is, do you believe that this is a person that's going to be able to energetically meet you or be open to
Mm,
experiencing sex in a
mm,
different way? And you have to build that emotional connection prior to getting naked with them and be able to build some kind of intimacy with them to where you could be comfortable enough to talk about wanting to have or sexual experiences that are more full body and very present. And I think if women
mm,
kind of took that into consideration when deciding whether or not they're going to engage in sex, because at the end of the day, if you're not having an orgasm, even just from the mechanical way of sex, then why I just feel like it's not really worth it because it's such a empty experience. And again, like you said, getting energetically dumped on from a partner is not, it can go both ways, not really why are you doing that? There's such a better
yeah,
experience I think that could happen, and why not experience something more profound than just a mechanical exchange
yeah.
that's like, "All right, I got off, you got off, okay,
And
bye."
really, really valid. I love it. I think also in that the just the when to have sex when dating, right?
Mhm,
Even to have that thought is mentalizing, strategizing, almost coming out of yourself to like, if I don't have it within the next 3 weeks, he's going to leave. I mean, that is no way to come into a relationship on that agenda of it's him rolling and organizing this. It sometimes you can have amazing sex with someone you're not going to see again. We're not saying you've got to, there's different courses for different horses, but it's
mhm,
about you knowing you. Like if you are someone who gets off on the odd occasional one night stand,
mhm,
fine. But if you're someone who does that and then next day feels absolutely like roadkill,
mhm.
that is a really good lesson for you, that that is not how your energetic body responds. It cannot ultimately do life like that, otherwise you'll make it ill, you know.
Yeah. I totally agree, and you're so wise about this stuff that I mean, I've learned a lot from you, but there are so many questions here about how do I keep the spice alive, and when's the right time, and how do I take the lead, and how do I stop expectations, leading to disappointment, but also wanting
Mm,
to get excited about a guy. And I think everything we've discussed earlier, if you are approaching a relationship from that choosing yourself, from being okay with who you are and coming
mhm.
to sex and coming to a relationship where you're like, well, let me just see how I feel about this person, if they're going to respect the fact that I want a deeper something deeper and more meaningful when it comes to sex, that you're not even going to have to worry about any of that stuff, right? I mean,
Yeah, because you're focusing more on what you need, what you want, how you'd like to explore, rather than having to shapeshift to what that is, whatever they want ultimately.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, there was a question about does there need to be games played or manipulation from a woman in order to get a man, for example, which, if you wanna touch on that or if you feel like everything we said was already covered on that.
I think again, manipulation is again that sort of mentalized structure,
Mhm,
and it's like you're trying to do something to get something, and I think that is massively conditional, rather than this ebb and flow of an unconditional. I want to be in here because I want to be in here, rather than I have a gun to my head to be in here. I remember working with a client who'd had an affair, and she was a woman, and all of her friends, um, the husbands of her friends were basically saying to their wives, "If you ever do that, I'll fucking kill you." Like
mhm,
that was the tone of voice that went ricocheting through her social community, rather than the men actually looking into that and going, actually, wow, women can actually have affairs just as much as men. Those men had sort of parked their women up as if, like, put a ring on it. happy wife, happy life. I just buy her things and she's fine. And forgetting that she's a sexual entity. And actually, guess what, buddy? She may not enjoy how you do sex. She may actually say, "Look, I'd like it like this now." Actually, I've noticed you're quite selfish as a lover. What about me in this? And I think that was an amazing wake up call that her social group didn't pick up on. And instead, they did the witch thing again. They put her in the water. She floated, and they went witch,
Yeah. Crazy.
satanic, possessed, dark forces, midlife crisis. That's the one they usually go for.
And if yeah, and if women want to learn more, even younger women want to learn more about this, I think you've mentioned like studying archetypes and historically the the stories that have been told around women to be negative and take that power away from them would be really helpful in understanding maybe what influences have
Mm.
created the society that we're
Yeah.
living in today, and then also how it's influenced them and how they show up in their own life too.
That's a good point. I think the book "Women Who Run with the Wolves" is a really good book because it has a lot of tales that run through it that that are teaching you about the ways of the feminine without banging you over the head about it. And I think equally, if you respect or admire someone that you see in society or who lived long ago, it's not about who they really are. Again, we're back to projection. What do you project onto them? What are the qualities that you
Mhm.
see that you don't embody in you? And what would it be if you did embody those characteristics? What if you saw Botticelli's Venus, with her Titian hair, and you went, wow, imagine if I went through my week with an energetic of her, like, so I was just enjoying my own pleasure. So
Yeah.
you'd have candlelit baths for yourself. You'd masturbate whenever you wanted. You'd be really in the rapture of your own energetic, your own body. I joke about, you go to the supermarket, you'd buy melons, but she'd spend hours, like, smelling all the different melons, getting high, almost intoxicated on the aroma and the sensoriness of that melon, rather than if I go as Jane, I'm just going to buy 4 melons, then I'm at the
Mhm.
checkout. You get the difference. Like,
Mhm.
explore these ways, these archetypal ways of being the feminine. Who are you when you're more of, I don't know, like an Atlanta woman, like you're strong. They kept all their men in a pen, and they only took them out when they wanted to procreate. And they cut off a breast so they could use their bow and arrow more effectively. That's that Amazonian woman. Well, maybe you don't want to be quite so much like her, because we're kind of a bit like that today anyway. And maybe you just want to look at someone who embodies it. I don't know, maybe Princess Diana has it for you. I'm just trying to think of
Yeah.
women out there in the world carrying something. Maybe there's an actress who has it for
I
you.
was gonna say someone you asked me this before, like finding a woman in life today, and I think for me, I was thinking like Selma Hayek. For some reason, she is a
Mm.
very sensual woman who seems strong, but still has that feminine quality. I don't know her personally, but in my mind, she's like very
It's
sexy,
not
but
about
also
it's not about
yeah, very.
not about learning them personally. Just, it's all about what you project on them.
Mhm,
Doesn't matter if they are completely opposite in their own real life. It's just
mhm,
about, what do you perceive them to be? And
yeah,
then, can you literally breathe that into you? Can you imagine, okay, I'm going to be Selma Hayek for the day. I'm going to move as she moves. I'm going to, feel it. I mean, you just have a different day if
mhm.
you were her.
Yeah. And that's I mean, you mentioned, like, taking baths and stuff, so someone asked ways of practicing self-love, and then when they're, should they refrain from dating when they have anxious attachment, how do you cultivate that self-love and confidence when dating? And then there was a counter question, and I think I'll let you get off after this.
That self-love thing is a really interesting question. Again, we're back to mentalizing.
Mhm.
Okay, there's me, and then there's self-love over here.
Mhm.
It's like something I bolt on to myself. Okay, I'm going to practice some self-love today. No, it wants to be in your veins, running through your arteries, like the breath that you breathe. You're not conscious of that every day,
Mhm.
but it's moving through you. Your heart is beating. And everything we have talked about today is massive self-love, evoking, showing to you. Everything.
Mhm.
If you just follow all of those principles we have talked about, you will be building self love. Because what I hate about the psychological, crazy self help community at the moment is It's all these bolt-ons. Okay, work on shadow, bam, 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 bam. Work on your inner child, bam, 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 bam.
Mhm.
Work on self-love, bam, 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 bam. Look in the mirror and say, I love me, I love me, I love me. No, don't work on the things because that's amplifying the things as if you've got an issue. Park them and just work on going there where you are doing things, making choices, feeling into things that is all about how much you care for your own well-being, your own safety, your own boundaries, your own happiness. All of that is building self-love.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes. So let me just see here. I mean, Jane, I think we got through most of the topics that people were wanting to talk about today. Is there anything else that you want to maybe share that we haven't covered? Because I think this was so informative and so helpful on shifting perspective on yourself and how you approach dating for sure. It was so helpful. So thank you. But yeah, anything else you want to share?
Um, I think well, A, it was just great talking to you, and it always is a pleasure. And I'm sure the listeners will come up with even more questions, which we'd love. So,
Yeah.
keep bringing them to us, and we'll keep answering them because it's a
Yes.
joy just to hang out and chat. And the thing I would just impart on people is just to start a meditation practice. And that sounds clunky. I'm so fed up with seeing another meditation app. And again, it's like, meditate because it will change your life. Well, actually, no, it won't change your life because you're just doing it over here as if it's a whole separate entity to the rest of your life. I just mean, can you sit quietly long enough to really notice yourself, your breathing when you enter a room or how it changes? Your push away from someone or you're leaning in to something, can you start to feel your intuition, your gut again when maybe you're reading an email? That is meditation. It is an inward facing process. It, concentration is focusing on a mantra, or trying to count your breathing. That's just concentration. That's learning to train the mind. Meditation is about building and creating awareness. I am aware as I sit in this chair, as I talk to you. I'm noticing when my body gets animated and I'm leaning in. Clearly, there's something I'm excited about. And I'm noticing where I start to maybe start to really listen to you and you become really interested in what you're saying, the dance of it. And it doesn't want to become clunky and it doesn't want to become yet another thing to do on your to-do list. It wants to be as easy for you as the breath. Then on top of that comes then the psychology and the inner work. So you can't do the psychology, the understanding of all these different labels we've got out there, like projection, cognitive dissonance, my attachment styles. That all becomes heady again. So I'm meeting clients who are saying, "Oh yeah, I did inner child work." Well, guess what? Your inner child is a living, breathing thing and lives in you forever until the day you die.
Mhm.
So you don't just get to park it and go, "Oh, I did that." No, it's like an onion layer we're forever going deeper with. And that's the same in all of this. So psychology then becomes inner work, an inner process. Processing embodied, processing the breathing, processing the awareness, processing the relational. It's all part of this whole big bag of goodies that we want to really start to get excited about because this being human with consciousness is rare, it's beautiful, it's exciting, it leads somewhere amazing that no one can lead you to apart from yourself.
So amazing and so wise. And I think this is key to highlight because I think that's the missing link for people a lot. And anyone who's afraid of seeing a therapist or anyone who doesn't understand what a therapist or understanding their own psychology, the whole purpose of, well, person centered therapies, which is what you would do when you have talk therapy one to one with a therapist,
Mhm.
is to get the client to self reflect and to start to understand their own feelings and behaviors. But if you're not doing it from the way that you just mentioned, I think that explanation was so helpful also for people who don't meditate and don't know what it's like to be self aware or don't understand the concept of it mentally, is that it's getting you, what you always say is to be embodied, and that's where it starts, right? To start to understand and pay attention to what's happening within you. So if you have anxiety or you are depressed, it's usually a disconnection from yourself, right? So I think if you do what Jane just said, and you experience any of these symptoms, that show up in your life emotionally, that will be the key to help make that less of a dominant experience for you, right? That's just what
Yeah,
I think I've
absolutely,
experienced.
absolutely.
Yeah, so helpful, Jane. That's so great. I just love your perspective and your approach on all this stuff. And you guys doing that inner work is so helpful. And yeah, and I think everyone, like you said, it can be confusing for people because everyone's an expert now and everyone has the solution, everyone has the answer, and it becomes then so complicated because it actually is doing the opposite for people. Instead of connecting you to your body where you're able to then understand how you need to heal, it's pulling you out of
Definitely.
that and into your head, and something that I struggle with often myself. So,
There's a lot of people out there with absolutely no expertise, no training, no real sense of what they're trying to do actually, and they can be damaging. I'm
mhm,
meeting people who now have been damaged by therapy. And so don't, I think again, this is a whole other conversation, but if you are going to go to therapy, you have to interview your therapist. You have to check into what is their lifestyle like? Why are they in this? Are they in it to make money? Is it a living for them? Is it something that's a little bit more embodied for them, as in it's a sort of call to action? Are they in it because they felt a victim at some point, and so they're going to have a sort of victimizing, let's collude with you energetic? You have to really be very discerning if you choose to work with someone. There's a lot. I had a therapist once who basically, when I walked in the room, he said to me, if I was 20 years younger, I'd be saying, let's go off to Ibiza for the weekend and fuck like monkeys until the sun comes up. That was my first meeting of this
oh
guy.
god.
And I didn't want to go back, but my friends were all like, you should go back because you're trying to find your voice. I just got divorced, and it's really important you go back because you need to make a stand because he can't do this with other women. And I was kind of like, yeah, actually, you've empowered me enough. I'm going to go in and do that. I went in. I noticed how I did it in a very kind, loving, typically, I'm a carer, nurturer. I'm not going to accuse you. I'm going to basically go, I don't know if it was a slip of the tongue. I don't know, maybe you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, but basically you said this and it's not okay. He listened for a minute, then he turned around and he said, well, for me to have said that, you must have been putting it out there.
Yeah, he shouldn't be in that position.
And that guy is still operating today.
Wow.
And he knows I know him.
Wow.
And then a girlfriend who was working with him basically had a fallout with me because she said, well, I've been seeing him for 5 years and he's never come on to me. Can't
Whoa.
win.
Oh boy. Yeah, you're the problem then. That's the other issue. Oh, that's not good.
Now, but imagine in that position, if I had stepped forward and I'd have basically said, this is not okay, he could have basically turned around that on me and said, well, you're a bit of a nutter, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? Like I was
Mhm.
vulnerable. He could have turned that around and gone, I never said that. This is not, you're making it up. You're a crazy lady. That's what we women have to put up with.
Yeah. Insane. So choose wisely, and just because one therapist doesn't work out, it doesn't mean that you can't find someone else who's a right fit.
Interview a few for them, interview them. Don't just take whatever comes. You have the power when you go there. Don't give all the power to them. They're human like everyone else. Check. If they've had 5 divorces, you really don't want to be talking to them about relationship advice.
Yeah, makes sense.
If they're saying to you, you need to come back every week for the next 3 years, they are wanting you for your money or they're codependent.
Got it.
I'm on my high horse now.
No,
I'm going to get off
I
it.
it's helpful because I mean, I'm in school obviously learning about this stuff, and we talk about all the different dynamics too, so it's really interesting. Anyways, thanks Jane
Thank you so
so
much.
so much. That was so helpful and amazing, and I'm going to let you go. And thank you
My
for being
cat's
here.
going crazy.
Oh, it's okay. I'll let you go.